Good evening. Welcome to the Spiritual But Not Religious Show. My name is George Lewis. I'm your host. Boy, we've got a fun evening lined up tonight. My guest, Sunny Dawn Johnston, she's vibrant and vivacious and really knows her stuff. So you're going to enjoy tonight. Before I tell you much more about Sunny and we get her on the line, let me give you an idea about next week's guest. Amaya Victoria. Amaya is a teacher, a healer, a guide, and she has a center in West Los Angeles. Should be a very interesting show. I want to talk with you about the Spiritual Broadcasting Network and the Spiritual But Not Religious Show. Our main focus and main purpose is to bring the many varied voices of the spiritual community to you. You know, major religions all have their place. They've got their churches, their synagogues, their mosques. They all have places that they meet. They have community. The spiritual community is pretty wide, pretty varied, and often we don't meet. Many people don't go to church. And so in that process, we lose some of the power that we have to really bring about some positive kinds of changes. And I think, most of our viewers and most of the people we're in contact with really know that today there is a transformation. It's been in progress for a long time, but it's coming to a culmination, a tipping point, if you will. And we're working at doing our part in that by bringing all these voices together and giving you an opportunity to hear, to see, to get to know these people. And to help bring this change about, because it's going to happen one person at a time. And you know what? I think the really good part about this, there's an 80-20 kind of I don't know if you want to call it a law or a rule, but it's something that's been around for a long time. And it's kind of like 80% of the work gets done by 20% of the people, maybe less. And that's in about every organization that there is. And I think as far as transformation is concerned, we're looking at that same kind of numbers or less, people who really need to make a change before we hit that tipping point. And we certainly need that. So that's what we're all about. That's what we're up to doing. And in the fall, we're going to be having a lot more programming for you, not just this show, but many other shows. Tom, I guess we're ready for Sunny. Have you got Sunny on the phone?
Yes, we do, George.
Okay, Sunny, are you able to hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Well, it's really a pleasure. I've been looking forward to talking to you. I've watched a lot of your videos. I'm pretty familiar at this point with what you do and who you are. We got a more in common than what you might know.
Really?
You were born in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
I was.
I was born there.
Really?
Yeah, and you're the very first person I ever met who was born in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Yeah, there's not many of us.
No. Are you familiar with the Army fort there, Fort Francis E. Warren?
I have heard of it. I was born at the Air Force Base.
Oh, were you? Well, I was born at the Army base there. My father was in the war, and my mother had come out there to get the medical care and all of that. I don't know anything about Cheyenne though. I left there quite suddenly and then ended up in Florida at about a year old, and that kind of became my roots. Although I was raised in Michigan, you were raised in most of your time was spent in Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City, Utah. Yes.
Well, tell me, you've been in metaphysics for a long time. That's very interesting to me because LDS is so big out there.
Right. It is very interesting.
Yeah.
I grew up. I lived about 10 years in Utah, which is the place that I lived the longest because I kind of traveled around quite a bit.
Right.
But most of my family, actually all of my family on both sides is LDS, and
really?
Both of my parents were, although they left the church when they were 16, 17 to kind of figure out what they were, who they were, and so by the time I came along, my mom had gotten pretty clear that she was looking at all different types of religions and trying to find her place, and at about 6, she happened upon metaphysics, and that's kind of where she settled in. And so from that age forward, I was given the opportunity really to be able to have a lot of different experiences. And as a young kid, I would go to crystal healers and lay on crystal beds and have my astrology report done and numerology, and I did runes during the evening and learned to study those, and so
Well, that's
really
pretty
given a great
fantastic.
opportunity in the midst of being in that environment, though, which was very challenging.
Well, I'm sure it was. Well, LDS, isn't there kind of a mystical component to that, kind of a metaphysical ring? It doesn't really come out, but it seems to me there's some of that involved with LDS.
There is. They do have some beliefs that are similar to some of the metaphysical aspects, although they wouldn't consider it that way.
Oh,
I'm
sure. A different name. Well, yeah, but the Catholic Church does the same thing. They wouldn't think about meditating, but they certainly do have contemplative. I forget what it's called now, but it's meditation and it's mystical by any other name you might want to call it. The other thing we got in common is you got a couple of dogs, huh?
Yeah, I do have a couple of dogs.
What are they?
They're mixes. They're angel sent, heaven sent, little mutts, kind of.
Well, I got mine out of jail too, so I got a couple of labs and I got a little Shih Tzu, and I bring them into the studio with me. They're hard. You fall in love with them, I think.
Yeah. Ours both came to us. So one we found in the forest, and one
really?
my cousin found on the side of the road. So, and then we had two black labs that just passed last year. So yeah, we are dog people too.
Yeah, well, my one lab is a field lab, and he's like he was 140 pounds at once. He was a big old fat sausage, but I got him down to about 110 now. He's looking pretty good, but he's a big guy. So, we got so much to talk about with you tonight. You are a very interesting woman. I just appreciate the work you do, and I am so on the same wavelength with you in where my path has brought me to pretty much very similar understandings. So if I question you on as though I were the devil's advocate on something, I want you to know it's not from not being in agreement, but just so that we can make our audience really understand and be more aware.
Sure.
One of the things that you're involved with is the body image and self-worth. And I think that's just hugely important with our spiritual path. I think without those, we're really kind of blocked.
Absolutely, I agree. 100%. I'm doing a class right now on just loving and accepting yourself, and body image is certainly a big aspect of that. But really, just getting beyond the physical and really embracing that innate being that we all are, and being able to see that and witness that, and once we can do that, then a lot of the issues and a lot of things that hold us back can really, we can move beyond them, so we can get to what we really want to do here and be in joy and love and harmony.
Well, it's so easy to get focused on the little wart on our left cheek rather than the goodness that we have. People, some people I've worked with, they do so much good, so many great things, and they think, well, and yet they'll compare themselves with somebody who's sitting on death row. I mean, as far as how they treat themselves.
That's so true. That's exactly, and they can be the most wonderful people, and then have such low self-esteem and not understand their innateness, their gift within themselves, and they can look all outside of themselves and see it, but they can't see it within them. And the reason that that's so important to me is because I've been that, I've walked that, I've learned that, and growing up in Utah and not being the same as everybody else caused me to really become quite judgmental, and because I felt judged, therefore I judged, and or vice versa, which came first. And so I've walked that journey for many, many years, and struggling to not only love and accept myself and appreciate myself and my body and my uniqueness and all of those things, but also understand that that I am unique and I'm not meant to be like anyone else, and it's okay. And so in an environment growing up for me where similarity was so important, and it is in many people's environments, and feeling kind of like the odd one out, it was a real journey for me, and I think that's why I'm so passionate about it, because once you get that, nobody can take it away from you.
Absolutely. One of the things that I saw very clearly as I was researching you is that, I have the same experience. So when I hear you talking about how to be able to get from that to a better place, I know that you know what you're talking about. It's not some kind of an opinion. It's pretty easy if something comes naturally for us that we think that everybody else ought to be able to do it if we can do it, and that's just not the case because we just don't all have the same challenges.
Absolutely, and I find that one of the great gifts I was given in being brought up the way that I was, and is that that I got to walk through that, and I got to learn that, and because of that, I'm able to not only witness it in someone else, even if it's not flagrant, if it's not evidence physically, externally, because a lot of people hide it very well.
Oh, really well, yeah.
But because I'm so sensitive and energetic, I can feel that, and so I'm so grateful for those experiences. Although if you would have asked me then, I would have said no, I don't want any of this because I know what that's like. And a lot of times when people come into a workshop of mine, they don't think that I've walked that journey. And so when I'm able to share, I've been there and I understand what that's like, and I can't tell you every single step for you because you're different than me, but I can tell you some things that could help support you if you're ready to move that direction. And it's such a great thing because those great gifts that they're seeing in everybody else or seeing in me or whoever, you have to have those within you in order to see them outside of you.
Absolutely, and that goes for the bad too.
Absolutely,
yeah, it goes for the whole thing. One of the things that you said in one of your workshops was that the fact that we're here says that you're all right.
Right.
What that reminded me of was Desiderata. Are you familiar with that? Well, Desiderata, I will email it to you. It's a poem that it was claimed to have been back from the 1600s, but I think it's actually like 1965 or something. But one of the phrases is, "You are a child of the universe, and you have the right to be here." And it's kind of a declaration of human rights, is what it is. It's really, really very powerful.
Oh yeah, I'd love to see that.
I too am energetic and sensitive, and so I pick up on what you were talking about, those smaller things that people are trying to hide. That I don't know about you, but that gave me trouble in my own life for quite a while.
Yeah,
until
it did. I had a lot of challenge with it because number one, I didn't understand it,
right,
and number two, I didn't know that it wasn't mine. I tended to carry everybody else's feelings and emotions and not know that they weren't mine, and so I would absorb a lot of pain and sadness and frustration and all of those things, and it took me many years and a lot of internal work to be able to figure out that wasn't mine.
Absolutely.
And so you can heal your life. Louise Hay's work came along for me.
She did some powerful work.
She did,
yeah.
and she was the one that really helped me to see, hang on, you're holding on to everybody else's stuff, and their stuff isn't about you. Your stuff is about you, but if you're carrying that energy, then it becomes about you. And so that really was such a huge stepping stone in my awareness and in my growth.
Yeah, I suspect you probably logged some mirror time with "I love you, Sonny." I love you.
Logged a lot of mirror time. Still
Absolutely.
do sometimes. Yeah.
It's amazing that all of that kind of thing, how powerful it is, and just how much it actually works.
Yeah.
You're also well. Before I go into this, one of the things you talk about, which is so right on, is the idea of our life's purpose. To give us a little rundown of what your take on that is.
Well, I was just asked this the other day in a class that I was offering, and I had several people in there that started mentioning life purpose, and they wanted to know what their life purpose is, and I have such a simple explanation, and a lot of people don't like it. They think it's too simple.
Oh yeah, we don't want this.
Right, it's too easy, and I think really, our life purpose is wherever we are in this moment, and people be like, well, but this can't be my life's purpose because this sucks right now, or this is really hard, or
right,
this is painful, or this is not where I want to be. And and the example that I use is, for me, I was pregnant at 18 years old and was on welfare and food stamps at 19 having this baby, and And during that time, had anybody ever asked me, oh, do you think you're serving your life's purpose? I would have said, absolutely not.
No way, right?
No way am I meant to be doing this. And a few years later, I got married to a great person and was trying to have a baby and had 3 miscarriages and struggled along the way. And had somebody said, hey, do you think you're serving your life's purpose? I would have said, absolutely not. But as all of that has come to a place where now I have so much gratitude and appreciation, and I've done the work around forgiving myself and everything else, I can look at every single one of those experiences in my life, all of them, and see the purpose in those, which has created the life purpose. And I think so often people look at it, it's like an end of the rainbow. It's at the end of my life, I will have served my purpose. And it's at this moment today that we're meant to serve our purpose, whatever that looks like in this moment, not in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. And it's so simple. I think sometimes we miss the simplicity of things.
Well, not sometimes. I think more often than not, it's pretty easy to miss the simplicity of things. So we're looking for something a lot more. Well, it's like people with past lives. You talk with them, and most of them were Cleopatra or,
right.
King. And the truth is, if there's past lives that I had no famous ones.
Yeah, no, me either. I was the poor person on the corner. I was the pauper. It's always interesting.
Well, when you talk about those life experiences that you had, there's a couple of things I think are really important. One is that, for people who are struggling and that you're trying to help with your workshops, it has to offer a huge amount of hope that you could have come from there to who you are today. Because, if you just take things at their face value, it's hard to think of Sunny at 19 pregnant and on food stamps. It doesn't really ring with your personality as
right.
it shines through today.
Well, and I think that's probably why Spirit's guided me to be so open and so vulnerable in sharing
right.
all of those things, because it's important in not only in my purpose in this particular time, but in giving people that hope and that understanding that you can come from wherever you've been and you can create whatever it is that you desire. And if I can do it in the space that I was in with the struggles that I had, then then anyone else can do it too. So it just offers and provides that hope. And I will tell you that at the beginning, I wasn't real comfortable with it. I was like, I don't want all of my
we want to look good, don't we?
Right, craft
yes.
choices out there in front of the entire world. And then, Spirit very clearly said, you are to teach through these experiences and as an example of the direction we can go. So no shame in where you've been, but actually gratitude to be able to then share with others. And so when I heard it that way, I was able to let go of the judgment around it and recognize that there's so much value in that for so many other people that I can be vulnerable and share that, and it tends to be that's how I work.
It's also a very endearing quality once you really get past all of the worries about how am I going to look.
Right.
People
and it just so doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't exactly.
It doesn't matter. It's what matters is what people can take from it, how it's affected me, how I can grow, how they can grow, and what it looks like isn't what it's about.
Well, yeah, and all that stuff that you went through was really kind of like the Harvard you needed to be in the work that you do.
Absolutely.
And it's well worth every minute of it. You're a Reiki master. You teach Reiki classes.
I do.
So for those in our audience who don't understand what Reiki is all about, how about giving us a synopsis and why we need Reiki, or for that matter, do we really need it at all?
Well, Reiki is something that I kind of stumbled into, as most of the things in my life. I was guided there for unknown reasons, as far as in my humanness. And
right.
For me, it really helped me to learn to channel my energy. It helped me to learn to become aware of when I was absorbing energy versus to be able to observe energy. So Reiki is a Japanese healing art, and it's just based on universal energy. Do we need Reiki? No, I don't think that we need it. I think that everybody has the ability to do energy healing themselves without being taught Reiki.
Right.
Reiki is just one form or one channel that at a particular time in my life I was guided to, and I think that there's great value in it because it helped me. It helped me channel the energy. But is it an absolute necessity? No. But I would say for the people that feel guided towards it, there's a reason why we're guided.
Well, I use a little different word for energy, the word power, because it takes power for you and I to be talking to each other.
Sure.
And I'm not talking about the technical part of it. I'm just talking about the human part of it. And as I've come to understand it, Sonny, this journey is about learning the power or the energy that we have and learning its right use.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of the journey, and not that easy either. And it's like, and I think it's just like you said, it's probably not necessary, but it takes every kind of method or technique because of so many different diverse people, and our needs are different.
Exactly. So, you take the modalities that feel right to you at those particular times and use them to the level that you need, and then you pick up new tools. And so they're all stepping stones for us. And for me, that was one that at that time in my life when it came around was really of value, and I still offer it and I still share it as my way of giving back for all the gifts that I've gained from it. But there are lots of different ways.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, I have been in the metaphysical world since like 1970, 71, somewhere in there, long time. And, what I found was, and this really had a lot to do with the image that I held up for myself. There weren't very, very many men who were involved in metaphysics at that point. And I still find there are far more women who are spiritually aware or spiritually active than men. Do you find that same kind of thing?
Yeah, we have the 10-to-1 ratio usually.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? What do you think the cause of that is?
Well, I think that there are first of all, I have seen it change over the last 15
I have too.
years.
Yeah.
There are more men now than there have been in the past, and I think that part of it is that women we tend to even be taught, trust your gut, mother's intuition, that kind of thing.
Right.
Men aren't encouraged to go internal into their feelings. They're encouraged to be more external, and so I think that a lot of that is just society's effect and the way that we've been taught or raised. However, I think that my observation is there's a lot of men that are quite sensitive that are aware that there's something going on, but they either haven't had a safe place to explore it, it hasn't been accepted, they feel a little bit odd or weird, and so they just kind of push it down and ignore it. And like I say, I do think that's changing, and I'm so grateful that it is. But the male clientele that I have has definitely increased, especially over the last, I would say, 3 years. And then classes probably over the last 5. So we are gaining, some movement in that area.
Well, I think if we're going to have any kind of a global transformation, and I'm convinced that we're in that process and heading towards a tipping point, like men are going to have to be a part of this because, without that feeling part, we just find ourselves in too many wars.
Right.
And
well, and it is shifting, and I think too that a lot of the women that have been more, for lack of a better word, aware of that spiritual aspect and sharing and the intuitive aspect and things. A lot of the women that aren't trying to force it on their husbands, I want to be clear about that.
Right.
But that are just exploring their own experience and learning and growing. I think that a lot of the men that are connected to them are learning through that energy, even just being in their home. So it may not be that they're signed up for a class or they're reading every single book, but it is shifting kind of from the inside out.
Still being exposed. Well, like you teach by example. That's pretty obvious to me, and that's absolutely the best teacher. So I can see where that would be happening in the home. That's a really interesting take on it. I appreciate hearing that. So one of the things that like with metaphysics, back years ago was in some ways a lot like magic, in that magicians didn't, the really practiced magicians didn't want to give you their secrets. And, that's started to change somewhat. But, the one thing that I notice about you, you have several modalities that you do, and yet you teach all of them.
Yeah.
And you don't try to hold on to any of them. And that's an important thing. And maybe you can tell us why that's important to you and how that's came about for you.
Well, I think that the reason that I'm so interested in sharing is because I really feel like the information is not mine.
Oh, it isn't. Yeah.
It's come to me and comes through me, and it's meant to be shared with everyone. And so I don't own any of it, and I want to be able to give back. And so all of the things and all of the tools and all the teachers and all the lessons and all those things that I've been able to grow from, I want to be able to share. And regardless of, I have had people say, you share too much, or you ought to not tell everybody everything because, whatever. I just don't operate that way. I just really feel deep within me that, the things that come to me are meant to come through me. And when they come through me, then I'm able to share that with 10 other people, and they share it, and that's the ripple effect that changes our world. And
it's exactly right. Yeah.
And that's my goal is to just to be of service in whatever way I'm meant. So if I can do that by offering some guidance or support or information or a class or a workshop, then that's what I'm meant to do.
Well, the one thing that's pretty recognizable with you is that you have a servant's heart. And, as far as the spiritual path is concerned, without that servant's heart, it's hard to go very far on that path.
Right.
At some point, you really have to take other people into consideration and not the me stuff so much.
Right. And I do feel that that it's, I've always felt like I've meant to be of service in lots of different ways, even since I was a young kid. And I didn't always know exactly what that looked like. And, even 12 years ago, I didn't know exactly what it looked like. And today, I don't know what 10 years from now is going to look like.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
What I do know is how I feel.
Absolutely.
And that's what guides me.
Well, one of the really big problems in the world is, and we've seen it play out in Wall Street and in the greed with the bankers and so forth. That all comes very much out of narcissism or deep-rooted selfish self-centeredness, and the rub with all that is that we were created self-centered. I've never met anybody who on some level isn't self-centered.
Right.
But it's the selfish part that needs to be taken out of there. When I think about the work that I do with others, I have a self-centered motive in that. When I see somebody blossom and their life get better, there's a real payoff in that for me in a feeling level and in a self-esteem level. And so, my self-centeredness really has not gone anywhere. It just kind of like gets used for good rather than harm.
Well, and I think too, it's in the way you're channeling it. One of the things that I've talked to a lot of my students about is that as I've grown and evolved and kind of come to understand myself a little bit more, what I found is that the more I am centered in who I am, and the more clear I am about who that is, then the less effect it has on me what other people's opinions are, good or not. And so I would say that, I try to maintain my energy at a level that is the highest level that I can maintain. And there isn't a number to that. But when people give me praise or they love me or, oh my God, I can't live without you or whatever, that's great. That's nice to hear. Of course they can live without me. But that positive reinforcement is certainly nice, but it doesn't shift who I am, because I already know within me innately who I am. And on the other side of that, if someone has, oh, I didn't like your class, or you're a terrible teacher, or you don't really know what you're talking about, or you're crazy, psychics are evil, or whatever.
Right. And there's plenty of that.
That doesn't shift me the other way either, because I know who I am. And so my goal is always to maintain that level of awareness within me. And when when it starts um, to shift one direction or the other, I try to be really present with that to see what's going on in me. And so that's something that for me that's kind of how I monitor or tell where I'm at. And that's been very helpful for me.
Sure, and we're back at talking, really in very concrete terms about knowing what our energy or our power is and using it rightly.
Right.
The tough part about the compliments, like you say, they can feel good, but the problem is if you're going to take those, you got to be willing to take the other end too, because they don't come by themselves.
Right. Yeah, it's a harmony.
Oh, absolutely. There's that duality that we live in, and it's just going to be there. So you're a medium, and you also teach mediumship. What does that term medium mean to you?
Well, immediately
Excuse
I
me.
tend to be the telephone, the connector between the spirit world and the physical world,
Right.
but only for a short time. So I really do believe that if we have loved ones that have passed, that we ourselves can connect with them if we're willing to and desire to. And so I certainly am grateful and appreciate the ability to be able to be of service to people and make that connection for them. But again, the teaching aspect of it is I don't want to have people have to come to me in order to do something that they really can learn to do for themselves.
Can and should be, right?
So I become the telephone for them until they get to a place where they're ready to learn and to tap into that and do that themselves. And that's an important part of my work. Again, I'm leaving on Thursday to speak at the Parents of Murdered Children's National Conference, and I go there and I teach workshops on mediumship and how to connect with their deceased loved ones. And of course, certainly, I could just see them all as clients and make a bunch of money and do it that way, but that's
Right.
not what is important to me. It's giving them that awareness that, you know what, they're right there, and this is a sign, and this is a sign, and this is a sign, and when they recognize that, it puts their heart at ease. So it's real important for me to be able to share that with them.
Hope you'll pardon me with the cough. I've been plagued. I pretty much was getting over it today, and it seems to be back here this evening. I apologize for that.
No problem.
Excuse me. Yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. You actually co-authored a book around that same thing. I think it's called Find Me, and you're involved with an organization called Find Me, and also with Canine Search and Rescue, SAR. How about give us an idea of what that's all about? That's a pretty neat thing you're doing there.
Yeah, you're a good researcher. I got to tell you, you know all kinds of things about me.
Well, that's my job.
Yeah, Find Me is a nonprofit organization, and we have I think 95 psychics all across the world now, along with about 30 search and rescue animals and police detectives, not only retired, but then also we work with police all over the world, depending on what kind of case we're working or which case we're working at the time. And so we wrote a book about 3 or 4 years ago just on the way that our organization works. So as psychic mediums, the retired detective is the one that created this organization, and he just thought, if psychics can help give any extra pieces to the puzzle, then why aren't we using them? And so he created this organization, and what we do is we either work with the police department themselves or with family members, and we work cases to give them, clues, give them suspects' names. Sometimes we're required to offer GPS coordinates for where suspects can be found or where bodies can be found.
You're able to give GPS coordinates?
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
are actually required to within our organization now. So,
well, how do you go about doing that? That's interesting.
It's challenging, actually. As a medium in the work that I typically do, if I have a client sitting across from me whose mother has passed, I will tap into the energy of that client, and the mother's energy I can feel, and then I get messages through seeing, hearing, feeling, or knowing.
Right.
Well, in this kind of case, I get a name and a picture, and 5 days later, I've got to fill out basically what would be the equivalent of a police report, and the detail to it. And so it's been a great learning experience for me, because because I tend to be a feeler, so I'll feel different things.
Right.
Well, police need concrete things. They don't need how it feels. So, so it's been a learning curve. But
Police want the
typically, how I do
left
it is
brain stuff, huh?
exactly. So how I do it is I go onto Google Maps after I get a sense of if the person is deceased or not, and vibrationally maybe where they're at, and then I go through Google Maps and just move through it until I feel the area that feels appropriate. And actually, we've had many cases. I've had 3 cases where the body's been in within 100 feet.
Wow, of the
where,
coordinates.
Of the coordinates. And
Wow,
then our
that's
organization has had, more success than that. But, sometimes we'll be a half a mile off, maybe, wrong color building or something like that. But when we offer the GPS coordinates, and it gives them somewhere specific to focus on, and then they can move out from those places.
kind of amazing how much Google has come into our daily lives, hasn't
Yeah.
it? That's a bit frightening, actually. I hope they don't go the way of Microsoft too much. Jeez. But that's the problem with power. It does tend to corrupt. That's for sure.
It can.
So tell us what's your most interesting story that you were involved in? That's a very interesting thing.
With Find Me, well,
Yeah.
there's so many interesting ones because everything is so unique. That's one of the things I love about my work, and I do
Right.
so many different things. You never have the same day twice. Um, but there's a case here in Arizona where there's a young woman that was missing. Um, she'd gone on an airplane ride with a friend of hers, and the plane just ended up disappearing into thin air, and they could never find it. They couldn't find where it dropped off. It was under radar because it was a single-engine plane, so it was not one that they had to report the trip and
Right.
things like that. And so we, as a group, we are all individual. We don't know what anybody else is doing. It's very individual. It's all volunteer, and so we each worked the case, and I got a specific area. GPS coordinates of where this plane went down, but I was also told that she didn't want to be found,
Ah.
and that she was not going to be found until, at that time I got that she didn't want to be found, and so I shared that with the family and with the investigators who had put in hours, hundreds and hundreds of hours of flight time in a particular area in Sedona, Arizona.
Right. I'm familiar with Sedona.
So they looked and looked and looked. Well, later on, I found out that the reason that she didn't want to, because we worked the case again about a year later, looking to see if there was any new energy that we could feel from it, was that she didn't want her father to find her, and her father was on every single one of the flights
Oh,
looking
wow.
for her.
Wow.
And a year later, so this was 2 years after she went missing, some hikers found her. And of course, by that time, there would be nothing that would be as traumatizing to see for a father. So then she could be found. And
So she was being protective of her father.
right. She didn't want
Oh,
him to
wow.
find her that way because she was, she'd been in a plane crash.
Yeah.
The plane had been on fire. It was down in a very deep area that really you could barely even get to walk. And in an area that was very close to where I think 25 of the psychics out of 95 had within a mile radius of that particular area, but it was so difficult to find, and you couldn't see the plane from the air. And we all said that. We all knew you couldn't see the plane from the air, but we're trying to do our job and trying to help them locate her also, with her not helping.
Throwing blocks up for you.
Kind of, yeah.
Well, we see this. What's the show on cable? I think it's Psychic Detectives.
Yeah.
Well, and they kind of give you the idea that that it's accepted, but how do the police departments really take to the psychic aspect of all this? Are they receptive?
It's challenging because
Yeah.
we don't always know. Some police departments, we've had some that have just been open armed, like here, we've got this case, we don't know what to do. They come to us right away, and then we get some more activity because we get it right away. Most of the people that come to us come a year and a half, 2 years, 20 years later. But once we turn in our police report and we hand it off to the police department, it's really out of our hands. So we don't always know if they they followed up on the
Right.
leads that we gave, and until or unless the body's found. So I will say that I definitely think the energy's changing, and I think that there is more openness with it. But there are certainly some that are going to be closed-minded to it, and skeptical. And that doesn't really bother me. I don't care if they're skeptical. I
Sure.
just say, you know what, be skeptical, but give us the opportunity. If you don't have any leads anyway, then who cares? What's going to hurt you?
Sure. Why not? Why not check it out? Hey, by the way, have you met any psychic detectives?
Well,
They
we
must
have
be pretty intuitive if they're really good, I would think.
Well, we have one gal that's in our group that is psychic, and she's also a private investigator.
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, that's like the perfect combination. And the thing that I find interesting with her is, for me, it's challenging to think like a cop. It's not my nature. I'm
Absolutely.
much more sensitive and quiet and gentle, and well, not quiet, but gentle. And
Yeah, I wouldn't say you were quiet.
no,
Sonny,
not quiet.
No.
And then and for her, she's got the psychic aspect, and then she's got the investigative part that's looking for all that. So
Right.
That's fascinating.
That's got to be quite a combination. She must be pretty interesting just to be around, I would suspect.
It is. She's really dynamic, and she gets the hit, and then she knows how to follow it.
So the book itself is it on your website?
Yeah, it is.
What give our audience that website, and Tom will put it
website's
up in
my
the chat.
name, so SunnyDawnJohnston with a T.com.
.com.
And the book is called Find Me, and it is really kind of a how-to book. So there's 13 of us that wrote several different chapters in the book on the different ways that we use our gifts to be able to work the cases. So there's a remote viewer, there's a forensic astrologer, there's using pendulums and cards and meditation, and so it gives a variety of different ways that really, for a lot of people, they find fascinating as to how it works. And we're just all everyday people, and I think a lot of times people think you have to have these special gifts. Well, everyone has a special gift. It's just that they've forced us to become more aware of them because they're always in front of our face.
Yeah.
Or we've chosen to nurture them and to support them and to allow them to grow. But we're all just everyday people like everyone else. So I think that book gives a lot of opportunity for people to develop some of their own natural gifts.
So, by the way, I wanted to let our audience know that that you have a really a lot of videos up on YouTube, on your YouTube channel, that will be especially helpful for folks. So they ought to do it. They definitely want to do a search for you on YouTube. If you have any questions for Sonny, Tom will take them either by phone, and he's going to put that in the phone number in the chat room, or you can throw the question into the chat room, and we'll sure pose the question to Sonny. Sonny, let's go back to the mediumship for just a little bit and tell us what that. I mean, there's so many. When you talk about mediumship, are we talking about channeling, or because they're kind of like various aspects of mediumship, aren't there?
Well, there are. For me, I do a little bit of all of it. So there are times when it is just direct channeling. I'm getting direct messages right from spirit, and they're telling me specific, information, specific things. Other times, it's more impressioned in my mind.
Yes.
There's other times where I feel it. A lot of times when I do mediumship, I feel the way that the people passed in my body.
Really?
And that's actually was what was so challenging for me as a younger person is I've always felt people's emotions, people's pain,
Yeah, me too.
physical pain as well. And
right.
so it was scary for me when I first started having that happen because I didn't want to feel everybody's pain, and I didn't know how to separate from it and how to be able to observe it. And through many years of trial and error and experience, I've really found a way that there are times when absolutely I still feel the energy and I still feel the pressure. I'll feel the way someone passed, but it doesn't stay with me. It's almost like it's just a validation so that I can share it with the person, with the client, and then as soon as I acknowledge it, then it releases out of my body. And I don't feel it as pain. So like I just saw a gal last week whose son had been murdered, and immediately I felt pressure in the back of my head and pressure in my chest, and he was shot in both of those places.
Wow.
And I even grabbed, both places at the same time, and she was shocked, and she said, "Well, are you okay? Are you in pain?" I didn't feel pain, but I feel the pressure, and it's
Right.
very noticeable, but not uncomfortable, so to speak.
So
But if I carried it, it would be uncomfortable.
so do you channel an entity? There are a lot of people out there who channel entities, or do you? I mean, you're not following a single entity.
No. No, I channel whoever it is that
Right.
the person wants to connect with, and or whoever comes through. But I don't have a particular, like Esther Hicks that channels just Abraham. And
Right.
No, I don't do that. I've done some channeling at times similar to that. I'm not real comfortable with giving complete control of my body away.
I just totally understand that.
I've tried it a few times, and although I'm an ex-control freak, I still like to have a little more than that. So.
I'm glad to hear you're an ex-control freak.
Yes.
Yeah. Of course, we're all controllers to a certain point. Are you familiar with J.Z. Knight and Ramtha?
I'm slightly familiar, a little bit. I've seen some interviews and one of those shows with her.
Well, actually, J.Z. Knight was the force behind The Secret.
Oh, okay.
She's the one who brought the documentary out and so forth.
Okay.
But back, and this must have been like 85 or 86, and Ramtha was pretty popular, and I was living in San Diego, and I was dating a woman who had a church and was a pastor of a metaphysical church, and she was real into it. And I listened to it and went to a lot of the videos that they were showing, and it was really, really impressive until one evening I was watching the video, and Ramtha said that his main purpose was to become more famous than the most famous rock star.
Oh.
And that was like, I mean, what I heard was ego, and which to me is the opposite of a spiritual path. And I just kind of dropped that whole thing at that point.
Right.
That's really one of the other things that I have a bit of a problem with. When you hear Esther Hicks stuff, the information is it's all good stuff, but you just never know, like what entity you're really involved with.
Well, I guess the way that I look at all of these kind of teachings is I take what resonates with me and what feels good to me, what feels like it's in alignment for me at that particular time in my life, and then the rest of it I release. And there's times where I've listened to something, and I remember when I read You Can Heal Your Life when I was 19 years old, and in that book Louise Hay said, you pick your parents. And I'm like, hell no.
No way I picked these people.
No way.
Yeah.
And then, 2 years later, after, I have this son and he's growing up, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, that is true. So, as we grow and evolve, things that maybe we come into contact with at one time don't feel in alignment for us, and as our vibration changes, then we do change. So I always take the information that feels good to me, and not necessarily always feels good, but it just feels in alignment as truth for me. And I know, I really believe within myself that I know my truth, and my head might talk me out of it sometimes, but I really know that within my heart.
That's exactly how I've approached this whole thing, and the reality is, like you said, at some point I couldn't take it in, but somewhere later I was able to. But that brings to mind the particular question that I wanted to ask you. What I said that I might seem like the devil's advocate, but for our skeptical viewers, anybody out there who's like, they're teetering on the edge, is this stuff real or is it not real? When you say that that you picked your parents, how do you know that?
It's a feeling. It's an awareness. It's something that resonates just deep within my soul. And I have a lot of people, and I've had people in the past, and will continue to, and I'm sure that are skeptical. And I really do personally tend to be a skeptic at heart myself.
Yep, me too.
And I think that that's healthy. I don't struggle with that or feel challenged by that, because I really do feel like people need to have their own experiences, and whatever experience they have at that particular time becomes their truth. And so my mission never has been about trying to prove that this is real or not.
Right.
My purpose is more in being present with myself and growing and aligning and connecting with my source. And as I do that, I may be a support or a guide for others that feel in alignment with what I'm doing. And for those that aren't, that's okay with me. You know, I know that there's students of mine right now that 10 years ago couldn't have heard a word I said.
I bet.
And so I think that it's always about honoring where we are, and sometimes that's hard to do, and sometimes it's hard to do, you know, with people in your families and friends, and you get excited about something. One of the best lessons I ever learned after I found the Heal Your Life book when I was so young, and I'd had such a struggle, and I was in an alcoholic relationship, and I was with a guy that just struggled with that alcoholism and didn't work, and so, you know, I lived in a shack, and I had this baby, and I was on food stamps and welfare, and we had mice running over our feet, and I didn't have a bed. And I mean, it was just not a great existence. And that's when this You Can Heal Your Life book dropped into my hands, and I remember afterwards and doing that work for a couple of years and getting really positive and making so many changes, and I was like, oh my God, everybody in the world needs this. So I finally, after I got out of that place and got off of welfare and got into a comfortable place, I bought the books for everybody that I knew, and I thought, oh my God, this is going to help you because you're so messed up here, and this is going to help you because you're so messed up here, and you need help over here.
Yeah, but I'm not that bad, right? Yeah.
And they didn't read it.
No.
And I was like, how could you not read this? This is like the best thing in the world, but they just weren't there. And so it became such a great lesson for me. And you can share if people are asking, but for me, if somebody's not asking, I have plenty of people to share with.
Well, it also comes, I think, to honoring people where they are spiritually, because we're all at different stages spiritually, and that's a very natural part of it. I'll tell you what, over the last 35 or 40 years, I have known and talked to just a lot of psychics and intuitives and been pretty involved in that. And you are definitely the most grounded psychic medium, whatever you want to label yourself, that I've talked with. And I really appreciate that practicality that you bring to all of this. I think it's really, really pretty important.
Well, I do have two sons and a husband and my dog.
And they tend to keep you that way.
They all keep me grounded. And my husband is skeptical at heart too, and he has his own challenges around, and some of this stuff scares him. And so it's been very good for me as a teacher, I think, to have somebody in my life that I can learn so much from and love unconditionally that isn't similar to me, and it causes me to expand and to grow and to understand and to have compassion and to be accepting of his journey that's different than mine, but he's no less spiritual.
Well, I'm sure of that, yeah.
Different form.
Well, the other thing that must really do for you is it must cause you to become stronger in what you do and who you are in order to be able to have compassion in the middle of all that.
Right, and it's really just maintaining, as long as I know who I am and I'm following my guidance, then, and if I'm really walking my talk, then my teachings would be for everybody to follow their guidance. And everyone's is different at different times, and our journeys aren't meant to be the same. And I think that it's a great opportunity when we are surrounded by people who aren't exactly the same as us, because then I can learn from them, and it does keep me grounded. It definitely, I'm no big deal at home, and so
exactly
it keeps me in a space of being grounded and also being willing to look at my own the areas within me that I need to work on and to see clearly and to help to grow, because we're in a constant state of growth, and if you're here, you're growing. That's just the way it is.
And I think when we forget that idea or we lose that thought, then we have no chance at any humility or compassion. And I think those two are essential to any kind of a real spiritual journey. I think that that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah, and that's no easy job. However, it's
No, no, not easy. But I think that for many of us, we know that that is the job. Easy was never what I signed up for.
well. The other part of that too, though, is that it isn't easy. But I find that it's easier than when I was trying to defend all that part of me. That was harder. That's
Yeah, that's actually a really good point because
yeah.
that resistance is always harder.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hey, I got I'm a little curious. You were on George Norrie's show, Coast to Coast.
Yeah.
Give me what about your experience with there? How did you find George?
It was a few years ago, about 3 years ago, and I was on with the Find Me group. He was really quite interested in the work that we were doing,
I
and
bet.
I do feel like he has really helped to. I mean, there are some things even in my own space that are out there,
Yes.
that he, that he sheds light on. But he really was supportive of our group and of the intention behind it. So I really enjoyed the conversation. He was very knowledgeable. Also, he'd done a lot of research and knew what we were and what we were doing, what we were about, and I think that he serves a great purpose in showing the extremes of so many different ways of thinking.
Yeah.
That I really think that we need because it helps people see the diversity, and we're meant to be that way. That's how we grow.
Yeah, it's so interesting how diversity can frighten us so easily, and it's like there's no way you're going to have anything except diversity, and the only thing really is a kind of a surrender to that, and to begin to celebrate it as opposed to fight it. We're going to run out of time here shortly. I don't know. We got 2 or 3 minutes left. What do we got left, Tom? We got about 3 minutes left. What I would like to do is give you the 3 minutes here. If there's anything that you would like to talk to our audience about, anything, because there's so much we haven't touched on. We could have another hour easily. Maybe you can just kind of share that with us if you'd like. And if there's not, I got plenty of questions for you.
One of the lately, one of the big messages for me to share with people is really to recognize that self-value, that love of yourself, and to know that our emotions are such a help for us in recognizing where we are and how we're feeling. And if we're not feeling real good, if we're feeling down, if we're feeling angry, if we're feeling frustrated, it isn't. We always tend to project our stuff onto, well, if this person was doing this, or this person was doing this, or this person was upsetting me. And what I've learned in my life is that always, 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 it's about me.
Absolutely.
And it's always about my feelings, my emotions. And so if I'm not feeling good about something or somebody or a situation, it isn't necessarily about the situation. The reason that I don't feel good is because I am not being who I really am. So whether that's I'm being in judgment, or I'm being critical, or I'm being harsh, or whatever, it's pulling me away from who I really am. And so the more that we can recognize within ourselves where our feelings are, we get to create it. If you can create the mess, you can heal the mess. If you can create the disease, you can heal the disease. And so it puts the power back in our hands instead of the hands of whoever is doing whatever. And so I always want to encourage people to recognize that we have the power to create whatever it is in our lives based on how we choose to embrace or not our own experiences. And when we can learn from them and we can see, this doesn't feel good to me, then it's because I'm not being who I really am. And it never is about them anyway.
That's such a great point to come to the end of the show on. And you know what, Sonny, that gets back to the whole importance. I don't think you can really travel this spiritual path without having that kind of awareness that you're okay, because trust in what's going on an interior level is so vital to being able to follow that path.
Absolutely.
I think that's hugely important. Well, listen, it's unfortunate we've run out of time. I've just totally enjoyed my conversation with you. And if at some point in the future we're gonna contact you and get you back on here. And
That'd be great. I'd love to. I enjoyed it as well.
Okay, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. And you be sure and have a great week. Okay.
Thanks so much. You too.
Yep. Thank you.
Take care.
Well, that was a great interview, Tom. A great conversation. What an interview is a conversation. And I like conversations so much better than I like interviews. And she just brings so much to the table. I've got probably another 20 questions that I could have asked Sunny easily, and that I know that you would have been interested in hearing about. So it looks like we've come to the end of another show. Gosh, the time is going so fast. You know, it's what, close to the middle of August already. This year is like more than half over. It's amazing how quickly all this is going. So be sure and come back next week. I've got another great guest lined up. I tell you what, the show's producer, Tom Johnston, just does such a great job of finding and bringing really quality, good people here to the show. And I have a really good time. I am living the middle of my dream. I hope you're in the middle of your dream. If you're not, think about getting on there. And be sure and come back next week. And in the meantime, don't forget to accentuate the positive and have a fantastic week.